One weekend I decided to hike deep into the Blue Mountains, way off the beaten path, just to see what kind of game was moving before hunting season. I didn't expect to hear something that would keep me questioning reality to this day. The Blue Mountains practically sat behind my backyard, and as someone who lived for the outdoors, I was itching to explore a fresh route. I've always had a decent instinct when it comes to tracking game, but to avoid the usual crowds of weekend warriors, I knew I had to push deeper, way past the well-worn trails and easy-access spots off public roads. The farther out I went, the better. Growing up on a ranch in rural Montana, being outside wasn't anything new. I spent most of my childhood wrangling livestock, running through fields, and learning how the land breathed. By the time I was 10, I was already mimicking distressed animal calls, fooling coyotes into thinking dinner had just given up. Over the years, I learned to imitate just about everything from squirrels to bull elk. I'm not trying to show off here, just laying the groundwork. When it comes to animal calls, I know what I'm hearing. I can spot the difference between birds and mammals purely by sound texture, the cadence, rhythm, even the breath behind it. But what I heard that night? It wasn't either. I hit the trail later than I'd planned, but I wasn't too concerned. Dusk and dawn are prime times for wildlife activity, and I only needed to put a few solid miles between me and the closest road. That was enough. Eventually, I climbed a ridge and found a decent little plateau, flat enough to sleep, open enough to scan for game. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the hills, but all I saw were a couple of whitetails moving through the trees. I decided to go without a fire that night. Dry camp. Just me, my bivvy sack, and a cold early start come morning. I was bone tired, but something felt off. The air was still. Too still. The kind of silence that presses against your ears. Then, somewhere around 1 a.m, I bolted awake. The pain hit me like a hammer to the skull. My head throbbed with this intense, pulsing headache. It came in crushing waves, sharp bursts of pain followed by brief lulls, then another blow. I'm always careful about hydration, especially on long hikes, so I knew it wasn't that. Lying there in the dark, trying to outlast the pain, I suddenly heard something. A faint sound. Low and hollow, echoing from somewhere above me on the mountainside. Instantly, I froze. Headache forgotten. This wasn't an animal call I recognized. But it was big. You could hear it in the way the sound carried, the way it reverberated. Definitely a large mammal. But the rhythm? It was too deliberate. Too loud. It didn't shift or wander like a normal call. I tried to convince myself it was some unfamiliar bird native to Washington, maybe something I hadn't come across growing up out in Montana. But even as I whispered that lie to myself, my instincts were screaming something different. Whatever it wasn't moving. The sound came from the exact same spot, over and over again, repeating itself like a broken record. And the worst part? It was close. Way too close. By 2 a.m., the headache was unbearable, and that sound, it was driving me insane. I had to make a decision, and fast. I tore down camp, stuffed everything in my pack, and decided to get out of there. The trail I'd taken in was steep and tricky in the dark, but I remembered a gated road just above my camp. It curved back to the main highway where I'd parked. It was longer, but safer in the dark, and unfortunately it also led straight toward the direction the sound was coming from. I didn't have a choice. As I started walking, I realized the sound was still with me. Following me. I could hear it moving parallel to my path, just a couple 100 yards above me, always keeping pace. No matter how fast I moved, it matched me. Every crack of a twig, every swish of a branch, sent bolts of adrenaline through me. And yet, I still couldn't see a damn thing. The sound didn't change. It didn't falter. Just stayed with me. Watching. I could feel it now, something was tracking me. I gripped my rifle tighter, my finger brushing the trigger. But what terrified me more than the sound itself, was that whatever it was hiding. Not avoiding me by accident. It was doing it on purpose. My headache got worse the farther I went. My breathing turned ragged, vision blurry, and I could barely stay upright. My balance fell shot, like my whole body was rebelling. Altitude sickness? Maybe. But something deeper was off. Eventually, as I dropped lower and finally passed below the tree line, something changed. Just like that, the pain stopped. Completely. Like flipping a switch. Whatever had its grip on me, let go. But that feeling of being watched? That didn't leave. I reached my truck just before sunrise. My legs were jelly, my mind racing. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't focus. Couldn't stop thinking about what I'd heard. Back home, I spent hours scouring the internet. I dug through bird call databases, memo recordings, anything to make the sound fit something real. But nothing matched. And then, on a whim, I searched for Bigfoot vocalization. That's when I found it. The exact sound. Same cadence, same low, haunting echo. My stomach dropped. My skin went cold. I felt that same dread, like I was back on that mountain with the thing trailing behind me. But here's the thing, I don't believe in Bigfoot. I never have. And still, I know what I heard. I've never heard it again. But sometimes, when I'm alone in the woods, and the trees go quiet, I start to wonder if it ever really left. I've always trusted the woods. Grew up in them. Hunted, camped, lived half my life beneath the pines. But one night, out by a stream deep in the Blue Mountains, that trust got shattered. And I haven't looked at the forest the same since. I'd gone back to that same part of the Blue Mountains once more after everything that happened. Walked straight through that tangled mess of brush on the north slope, right where the strange sound had first echoed down. I searched for anything. But there was nothing. Or maybe it was there the whole time. Just watching. Since that night, I've never hiked that far and alone again. Not because I'm scared of wild animals. Whatever was up there wasn't an animal. And it sure as hell wasn't human either. But I felt it. I knew it was there. Following me. Waiting. And I don't think it ever planned on letting me walk out of those woods. I live in a small rural town, one of those places where the tree line begins just past the backyard. Thick woods and mountain ridges stretch out forever, so camping became a weekly routine, even when snow hit the ground. The wilderness always felt like a second home. Until one night it didn't. It was late spring when a buddy and I decided to break off from our usual camping group. We were all around 16 to 19, typical rowdy crew, but we wanted some peace, and a better fishing spot. There was a stream about a mile off the main camp where the trout practically begged to be caught. Since our group only had one tent, my friend and I built a lean-to beside a huge boulder in a quiet clearing surrounded by towering pines. The place was perfect. Isolated. Serene. But maybe a little too isolated. Night fell fast. The fire popped lazily, and the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the thick, damp scent of moss and pine. My friend was out cold in his sleeping bag, curled beside the low embers. But me? I was wide awake. Something just felt off. I tossed another log onto the fire, hoping the flicker would ease the tension clawing at my gut. Sparks flew up, dancing against the black sky. I scanned the trees, letting my eyes adjust to the dark. And that's when I saw him. A man, standing at the far edge of the clearing, maybe 80 yards out. He didn't move. Just stood there, stiff, like a statue. The full moon backlit his frame, casting just enough light to show his outline, but not his face. Just a tall, still shadow, watching. My blood turned ice cold. I stared at him for what felt like forever, mind racing for any explanation. A hiker? A hunter? But it was too late for that. And he wasn't moving. Just observing. I didn't want to panic my buddy, so I kept one eye on the figure and slowly fed the fire. Then, just as suddenly as he'd appeared, the man turned and walked silently back into the woods. I told myself it was nothing. Just some guy passing through. But I never closed my eyes that night. I lay there, listening to every crackle of fire, every leaf rustling in the wind. That's when I heard it, a soft footstep. Close. My heart slammed against my chest. Then another one. Closer still. This time, I shook my friend awake. He groaned groggy, but sat up fast when he saw the look on my face. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. Then, snap. Another crunch in the brush. This one behind us. The sound started circling the clearing. Steady. Purposeful. We both grabbed our flashlights and aimed into the darkness, but all we saw was empty forest. "Probably just a deer," my buddy mumbled, though he didn't sound convinced. We lay back down, but the noises didn't stop. If anything, they grew bolder. Then we heard it, a whisper of fabric brushing against branches. Like clothes. Something, or someone, was definitely out there. Sometime after midnight, I must have drifted off. But what woke me next made my blood run cold. It sounded like a zipper. Our tent zipper. I shot upright. So did my friend. But then we realized, it wasn't a zipper at all. It was a slice. A thin blade was carving through the tent wall. My hand found his chest and I whispered, "Run!" His eyes locked with mine, and we moved. I grabbed my knife and tore through the tent flap. We sprinted into the trees barefoot, the cold ground biting into our feet, branches lashing our skin. Behind us, we heard the footsteps, pounding, fast, relentless. Someone was chasing us. Our lungs burned, legs screamed. We didn't look back. We couldn't. The forest was a blur of shadow and panic, and no matter how fast we ran, the footsteps stayed close. At some point they stopped, but we didn't. We kept running. Hours passed like minutes. We were completely lost. Everything looked the same in the moonlight. Every snapped twig made us flinch. Every breeze felt like breath on our necks. Somewhere near dawn, we collapsed, exhausted, scraped raw, trembling. "I think we need to find the road," my friend said, barely audible. We stood on numb feet, our bodies wrecked. But somehow, as the morning light spilled through the branches, we stumbled onto a trail. We never spoke about that night again. But every time I camp now, no matter where, no matter who I'm with, I build 2 fires. One to warm me, and one to keep whatever's in the trees too busy watching the flames to remember I'm still here. And sometimes, in the silence between the crackling logs, I wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't woken up in time? A few years later, I had another close call, this time with nature itself. And something a lot more real than ghost stories. But even then, the scariest part wasn't the storm. It was what got stuck in there with me. If you've never heard of a derecho, let me paint a picture for you. It's basically a colossal, fast-moving wall of wind that can rip full-grown trees right out of the ground. Imagine a freight train made of air tearing through a forest, turning everything in its path to matchsticks. Now imagine being in that forest when it hits. I had pitched my tent beneath a roofed pavilion, basically just a concrete slab with a roof over it. No walls. I thought it'd offer me a bit of extra protection from branches or debris if the wind picked up. Spoiler alert, it didn't. I wasn't the only thing seeking shelter that night. As the storm rolled in, trees bent and cracked under the pressure, leaves flew like daggers through the air, and the roar of the wind drowned out everything else. But even through all that chaos, I heard something else. It started as a light tapping, like claws clicking against the cement just outside my tent. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to believe it, but I already knew what it was. A black bear. And not just any bear, this one was frantic. Panicked. Angry. Now, I've dealt with bears around camps before. Usually you yell, stomp, maybe swear a bit, and they take off. But this one? It was different. The storm had spooked it bad, and now it was circling inside the same pavilion as me, pacing around my tent. I could hear it breathing, short, angry huffs. Every few seconds it would shuffle away, only to return even more worked up. The claws kept tapping against the slab. Back and forth. Around and around. It was losing it. And I was stuck in a nylon bag with nowhere to go. I stayed completely still, trying not to even breathe loud enough to draw its attention. The only thing keeping me grounded was the hunting knife I kept in my pack. Slowly, hands shaking, I unzipped the pouch and pulled it out. I wrapped duct tape around the handle in my hand, locking it in place. If that bear came crashing through the tent wall, I was going to fight. Minutes crawled by like hours. My grip was slippery with sweat, my heart pounding so hard I swore the bear could hear it. The wind outside screamed like something alive, and every few seconds another tree cracked and toppled nearby. But I couldn't think about that. All I could focus on were those footsteps. Eventually, thank God, the wind began to ease. The storm passed. And the bear finally wandered off, just as confused and tired as I was. But I didn't move. Not until the first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees. I stepped out cautiously, half expecting to see it still there. Instead, I saw claw marks, deep gouges all around the pavilion. Track circles. It hadn't just stumbled in and out. That thing had been running around me. That night? Still the only time I've ever had a black bear refuse to leave. Usually they're cowards. Not this one. That night, I genuinely thought I was going to die. One day, deep in the woods, I stumbled upon a campsite that looked like it was straight out of a survival magazine. Neatly arranged beds made of fresh brush, a perfect fire pit with wood stacked beside it. Everything was oddly pristine, almost staged. At first, we thought it must be a Boy Scout training ground or maybe someone's prepping setup. It was too well organized to be random. We dropped our gear, opened our snacks, and just soaked it all in. Everyone was cracking jokes, giving the place goofy names like Camp Cool and The Secret Spot. We honestly thought we'd found our new hideout, something special that no one else knew about. But as the sun began to dip behind the trees, the others decided it was time to head back. I wasn't ready. I told them I wanted to hang back a bit longer and look around some more. They gave me a hard time about it, said I should come with, but I was stubborn. I promised I'd be right behind them. I just needed a little more time. After they left, I stretched out on one of the makeshift beds, staring up at the sky through the canopy. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow through the leaves, and the breeze whispered gently above me. It was peaceful, like I'd found something untouched, something meant just for us. That's when I heard the snap. A sharp crack of a branch nearby broke the silence. I jerked upright, heart hammering, eyes scanning the trees. Nothing. Just quiet forest all around. Still, my nerves were buzzing. And then I saw it. At first, it didn't register. Something was hanging off a tree in the distance, way back in the shadows. I narrowed my eyes. It looked weird, like a crooked branch or maybe some old gear a hunter left behind. But as I stared longer, something inside me started to twist. It was too big. Too shaped. It didn't sit right with me. I tried to shake it off. I'm 5'9", stocky, not the kind of guy who spooks easy. I told myself I could handle it, whatever it was. So yeah, I walked toward it. Dumbest thing I've ever done. Each step made my legs feel heavier, like my body knew better than my brain. Maybe 80 feet out, I started chuckling, that weird kind of laugh you let out when you're terrified but trying to stay cool. I kept telling myself it was all in my head. Just a weird trick of the light. But when I got close enough, it was no trick. It wasn't a branch. It wasn't gear. It was a body. Just hanging there. I stopped cold. My heart was thudding so loud it drowned out everything else. I couldn't move, couldn't think. I just stood there staring. And when I finally saw its face, I lost it. That image is burned into my memory. The skin was discolored, shriveled, almost melting off the skull like something half-burned. It reminded me of that scorched corpse from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Mouth hanging open. Eyes black and sunken, like they'd been staring at me forever. I didn't even decide to run, my body just took over. I bolted. No finesse, no plan. Just full-speed panic through the woods. My legs were dragging, heavy like anchors, but I didn't stop until I caught up with my friends. When they saw me, pale, sweating, breathing like I just escaped death, they all froze. I collapsed in the dirt, clutching my chest, struggling to speak. Finally, between gasps and tears, I managed to blurt it out. I saw a body. The mood flipped instantly. Silence fell. A couple of my friends started crying. I gave them every awful detail I could remember, my voice shaking the whole time. We stayed there huddled together, far from the campsite, too scared to go back, too shocked to even think straight. Later that night, when we made it home, I told my parents everything. Of course, they didn't believe me. Thought it was some vivid story or a trick of the woods. I told them I'd prove it in the morning. I didn't sleep at all. Every time I shut my eyes, that face was waiting for me. As soon as the sun rose, I dragged my parents back to the spot. I walked them through everything, where we found the camp, where I'd laid down, where I saw the thing hanging. My hands were shaking as I pointed through the trees, heart in my throat. But when we got there, nothing. No body. No rope. No sign that anything had been there at all. Just a regular patch of forest, quiet and empty. I've run it through my head 1,000 times. Maybe someone moved it. Maybe I imagined it. But I know what I saw. I'll never forget that face, and the way it looked like it had been waiting for someone, maybe me, all along. Even now, I sometimes wonder if I really walked away from that place, or if a part of me never did. It was sometime after 2 a.m. when I heard something rustling just beyond the tent flap. At first, I figured it was just an animal nosing around, maybe a raccoon or a stray dog, but then I saw something move in the bushes. And that's when he came crawling out. An old man. Moving slowly on his hands and knees, inching toward us like something out of a nightmare. For a second, I just froze. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. I mean, who the hell crawls out of the undergrowth in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night? There was no good reason for anyone to be there. Not unless they were looking for trouble. My heart jumped into overdrive. I scrambled to wake my friend, shaking him hard while shouting at the guy. "What do you want?" I yelled. "What are you doing?" The old man stood up fast, too fast, and began babbling in a language I didn't recognize. The tone wasn't threatening though. If anything, it sounded like he was apologizing. He didn't come closer. Didn't try anything weird. Just spun around and disappeared back into the trees as quickly as he'd shown up. We sat there, completely stunned. And honestly, we didn't move. We just went back to sleep. Adrenaline still pumping, brains still buzzing, but too young, too dumb, and too lazy to really think it through. Looking back now, I can't believe we stayed. We had no idea who he was, what he wanted, or what he might have done if we'd been asleep when he showed up. It was one of those moments that made us realize just how exposed we were out there. A couple years after that, my buddy Greg and I found what we thought was the perfect backcountry camping spot in southern Utah. The place was called the Young Women's Group Campsite. Weird name, but the location was solid. The campground was closed for the season. That meant no fees, no running water, and no annoying crowds. Just peace and quiet, exactly what we were chasing. There was a trailer parked up at the big group's site along with a generator, an ATV, and a pickup truck. We weren't looking to bother anyone, so I drove all the way to the far end of the lot and set up camp near some picnic tables, hidden by the brush. From a distance, only my car was visible. After getting our stuff settled, we wandered over to check out the sunset from a nearby overlook. That's when a truck tore into the lot. It came in fast, too fast, and barreled down toward where we were, then looped up to the trailer. A guy jumped out, slamming the door and striding toward us like a man with a grudge. You could tell right away something wasn't right. He was fuming. Walked up like he owned the place and barked that we needed to leave, now. I kept calm and asked why. We weren't in his space, the campground was closed, and we hadn't bothered a soul. That's when he said he was with law enforcement, and this was his group's site. I asked to see a reservation. I already knew that group's sites were off limits for the season. He sputtered through some half-baked excuse and doubled down, claiming we were trespassing on his authorized grounds. I told him we'd pack up in the morning. That's when things got tense. He flashed a badge. Then a .40 cal pistol. Without warning, he threw my daypack across the ground. My pulse spiked, but I didn't react. I had my own concealed weapon, but I wasn't about to turn a standoff into something worse. What got to me wasn't the gun, it was his face. He leaned in close, too close. His eyes didn't just look angry. They looked unstable. My friend Greg, who had taken a few steps back, later told me he noticed the guy repeatedly tightening his grip on the pistol. I didn't see it, and honestly I'm glad I didn't. Greg was the one who cooled things down. Told me it wasn't worth it. He convinced me to let it go, to leave the site and not look back. That was the right move, though I spent the rest of the night fantasizing about getting revenge. Crippling his generator. Slashing his tires. You name it, I thought it. Back in Salt Lake, I started digging. I contacted the local PD and, to my surprise, they confirmed the guy was one of their own. Officer Neil F. I did some more snooping online and found he'd been involved in a police shooting not long before. At the time, I'd thought it was justified. But after what happened at the campsite, I couldn't stop wondering. Had he escalated that too? Did he bait someone the same way he tried to bait us? The department investigated, of course. Said we were the aggressors. Claimed we threatened him with a club. I'm 65. Greg's about the same. The weapons we were carrying? Trekking poles. Lightweight aluminum ones. They cleared him, said everything was above board. But in my gut I knew better. This guy wasn't stable. And worse, the system had his back. I still believe in good cops. But I've got no time for those who hide behind the badge and the bureaucracies that protect them. That day could have ended in a way none of us walked away from. And if not for Greg, maybe it would have. So, to him, thank you, my friend. And to Officer Neil, wherever you are. I hope someone's watching you now. Because next time, you might not get to rewrite the story. Some nights, I still think about what would have happened if I hadn't backed down. And I wonder, what kind of stories Officer Neil's telling himself to sleep at night. I was about 16 or 17 when I headed out with two buddies to camp in the far northern part of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. It was one of those picture-perfect days, sunny, 70 degrees, barely a breeze. We had no cell phones back then, so I called my mom from a payphone at the ranger station just to let her know we'd made it. She told me there was a storm warning, something about severe weather later in the day. But I brushed it off. I mean, sure, maybe some wind, but this wasn't tornado country or anything. We set up camp, did a little hiking, and by the time we made it back, the sky was already turning that weird gray-green color that makes your gut tighten. And then it hit. Wind came from every direction at once, howling like a train. A ranger truck flew down the road toward us, and through a megaphone we could barely make out the voice shouting, "Take cover! Tornado warning!" We didn't waste a second. We bolted for the bathhouse along with the few other campers scattered across the park. No one was talking, just running. Right as we shut the door behind us, the sky broke open. Lightning cracked across the sky like it was splitting the heavens in half. Hail, and I mean golf ball-sized hail, hammered the roof so hard it sounded like gunfire. The temperature dropped fast, from the 70s down into the 30s in under an hour. Inside, we huddled together, listening to the forest get torn to pieces. Branches snapped. Trees crashed. The entire building shook every time something massive hit the ground outside. The thunder was deafening. We sat in silence, too afraid to speak, ears ringing, hearts pounding. When the storm finally moved on, we unbolted the door and stepped outside into something that looked post-apocalyptic. Tents were torn apart. One was hanging from a splintered tree like a flag. Campers had been hit by branches, nothing fatal, thank God, but injuries were real. The entire site was in ruins. Giant hailstones lay everywhere, melting slowly into the frozen ground. The roads were blocked by fallen trees, so we had no way out. That night, we all slept in the bathhouse. The rangers rigged up propane heaters through the shower vents, which helped, but it was still bone-chilling. That tornado? First one to hit that part of Michigan in over 100 years. My tent was gone, shredded into ribbons, eventually found dangling from a tree. My parents ended up buying me a new one. I didn't expect that. But even with the upgrade, I'll never forget that storm. Nothing I've been through since has matched it in raw, chaotic terror. That is, until a few years earlier, a moment burned just as deeply into my brain. I was 12, camping with my family somewhere deep in the Colorado mountains. It was around 2 a.m., freezing cold, pitch dark, the kind of quiet that only comes when you're miles away from anything. I woke up shivering. I figured I'd head to the car and warm up for a bit, so I crawled out of the tent, trying not to step on my brother. Didn't matter, he woke up anyway and said he had to pee. Classic younger sibling move, just tagging along because he didn't want to be alone. As we stepped out, I noticed the light creeping over the ridge. I pointed to it and said, "Hey, the sun's coming up." My brother, being a little scout, immediately shot back. "The sun doesn't rise from that side." Naturally, I argued. I mean, I was the older brother, I had to be right. The noise woke our parents, and soon my dad poked his head out of the tent, blinking at the light over the horizon. But he didn't argue. He didn't say a word. He knew what it was. Forest fire. We were moving before I even understood what was happening. We didn't bother packing the tent. Just collapsed it as is and shoved everything into the back of our old '76 Ford Country Squire. Dad started the engine, white-knuckling the wheel as we bounced down those narrow, winding gravel roads. Smoke started curling in around us. No guardrails. Just steep drop-offs and the looming dread of something closing in fast. Dad kept saying we were ahead of the fire. That everything was fine. But the thickening smoke said otherwise. I remember staring out the window, heart racing, and thinking, we're not gonna make it. Then, coming from a side road, a game warden's truck appeared, lights flashing. He waved us down. My dad talked to him briefly, and the ranger told us he was evacuating nearby campsites. The fire was spreading quicker than expected, but we still had a window. Didn't feel like it though. The air was getting thicker, the sky darker, and it wasn't until we were far away, back home and breathing clean air, that I finally felt like we'd escaped. Sometimes I wonder, if we'd slept just a little longer that night, would we have made it out at all? Or would someone have found the remains of a melted Ford buried deep in the forest, nothing left but ash and bones? Every time I see news clips of families fleeing wildfires in the West, or up in Canada, something inside me tightens. That old fear creeps back in, a kind of dread that never fully goes away. I know exactly how fast things can spiral out of control, and how close disaster can feel when nature decides to turn. One trip in particular still gives me chills. We'd gone camping in the Grand Canyon. It was supposed to be simple, a few days surrounded by nature, away from noise and stress. Our daughter was 3 at the time, full of energy, running around the campsite, happy as ever. Then, she vanished. One moment she was playing nearby, and the next she was gone. Just gone. At first, I thought maybe she'd wandered a few steps away, maybe around the van. But the more I looked, the more panic started clawing at my chest. I shouted her name. Nothing. My voice cracked, louder and more frantic each time. I sprinted to the van, yanked the door open, and screamed again. Still nothing. I slammed it shut and ran, heart pounding, throat raw, tearing from campsite to campsite, calling her name over and over. My brain raced through every horrifying possibility. Someone took her, she wandered off toward the canyon's edge, she fell somewhere. Every terrifying scenario slammed into me all at once. Then I heard my husband yelling. He was by the van. And in his arms was her. Relief hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. But then he told me where he found her. Inside the van. I had checked it. I thought I checked it. But in the chaos, I hadn't looked closely enough. She had hidden under a pile of clothes in the back, playing one of her little games, the surprise hide-and-seek game I had taught her months earlier after showing her how to slide the door open and shut. The guilt hit me like a truck. It was over 100 degrees inside that van. And I had closed the door on her. I pulled her out and held her so tight I was shaking. She was fine. But I wasn't. We ended the trip right then and there. Packed up everything, drove out, and booked a nearby cabin. I couldn't bring myself to sleep outdoors again, not that night. Maybe not ever. That experience broke something in me. Even now, when I close my eyes and think about what could have happened if my husband hadn't found her, it makes me sick. There's a version of that day, somewhere, where we didn't check again. And that version haunts me. If you're a parent, you'll understand. If you're not, I hope you never do. Another trip that sticks in my bones happened up in Washington, near Mount Baker, at a place called Horseshoe Cove Campground. The scenery was beautiful. Calm lake, thick trees, peaceful air. But something felt off even before we settled in. When we first arrived, we passed a bulletin board, and right there, pinned at the top, was a missing person flyer. A man had gone out one stormy night and never returned. It said he didn't know how to swim. That little detail felt like nothing at the time, just another sad reminder of how unforgiving nature could be. The next day, we went kayaking on Baker Lake. It was calm, glassy, the kind of quiet you don't get in cities. We paddled around for a while, enjoying the stillness. Then we started heading back toward the shore. And that's when the smell hit us. It was faint at first, sour, musty. We figured it was lake stuff. Rotting fish, algae maybe? But the closer we got to the swimming zone, the worse it got. Heavier. Thicker. Wrong. That's when we noticed something under one of the buoys near the roped-off area. It was barely visible, just beneath the surface. At first, it didn't look like anything. But as we drifted closer, the shape became clearer. And then it clicked. A body. It was him, the missing man. Trapped beneath the buoy, barely hidden from view. The realization hit us hard, not just because of the body, but because of how close it was to the designated swim zone. Kids had been splashing in that water. Families laughing, playing, and none of them had any idea what was just a few feet away under the surface. We paddled back like our lives depended on it, and reported everything. Police showed up fast. They shut down the swimming area, but we didn't stick around. We packed up and left early. That place didn't feel peaceful anymore. Even now, I can't shake the image of that body just floating there, and the thought of how long it had been there while people played around it, completely unaware. Another trip, years later, took me high into the Rockies with a group of 8. We always preferred to camp far off the beaten path. No marked trails, no other people. Just raw, untouched wilderness. That time, we were camped at around 10,000 feet. Deep in the mountains. No cell service. No noise. No signs of life but us. It was maybe 9 or 10 p.m., pitch black and dead silent. No wind, no insects, just a heavy stillness hanging in the air. We were sitting around the fire, passing around whiskey, when a figure suddenly stepped into the firelight. A man. He didn't say a word. Didn't raise his hands. He just stood there, barefoot, shirtless, in the freezing night air, grime streaked across his skin like he hadn't bathed in weeks. A hunting rifle was slung across his back. His face blank. Empty. Like no one was home behind his eyes. But the part that made my skin crawl? We didn't hear him approach. Not a footstep. Not a snapped twig. He was just there. We froze. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. He looked at each of us slowly, just scanning, then, without saying a single word, turned and melted back into the darkness. We didn't sleep that night. We took turns keeping watch, keeping the fire going, our eyes locked on the tree line. And sometime around midnight the sound started. Barely audible at first, shifting twigs, a crunch of leaves, soft footsteps circling the camp. Always just out of sight. Sometimes we caught flashes of movement, a shape, a shadow darting just beyond the glow of the fire. He never came back into the light. But he was out there. Watching. We packed up before the sun had fully risen, moving fast, not speaking, barely breathing. The second we had service, I called the park service and reported everything. I don't know if they ever found him. I don't think they ever looked. I've never been back to that part of the mountain. And I never will. A couple years ago, I went camping with a group of friends in Jasper, 8 of us, just trying to unwind. We were all a little drunk, as you do when camping in Alberta. Sitting around the fire, laughing, swapping stories. It was late, maybe 10 p.m., and everything felt good. Then a car came flying up the dirt road and swung right into our campsite. We all turned, instantly confused. Headlights in our faces. Some dude leaned out the window and said, "This is the police." We froze. But something felt off. No lights. No badge. Just some random car and a guy claiming to be a cop. He didn't show ID. Didn't step out. Just said that one line, and drove off. We were all left staring at each other like, what the hell just happened? It felt wrong. The whole vibe changed. What had been a chill, buzzed evening suddenly felt heavy. Quiet. Like we weren't alone anymore. A few minutes later, a real park ranger rolled up in a clearly marked truck. By some miracle, they passed the exact same car that had pulled the stunt earlier. We waved the ranger down fast and told him everything. The car, the fake cop, how sketchy it felt. His face went serious. Real serious. He said they'd been getting calls all night, reports of stuff disappearing from campsites. People spooked. Creeped out. He said he'd radio the gate, try to track the guy. That killed the mood completely. We tried to joke about it, but no one was laughing. We checked our tents, locked up everything we could in the cars, and called it a night early. Even lying in my sleeping bag, zipped up in my tent, I couldn't relax. I kept hearing things. The wind in the trees. The snap of twigs. The shuffle of footsteps that might have just been my imagination, or maybe not. I never did find out who that guy was, but sometimes, late at night, I still wonder if he was out there watching from the shadows, just waiting for someone to fall asleep first.